All right, welcome everyone. My name is Justin Youngblood, and I'm here with Mike Haire to talk about how Palo Alto can stop attacks before damage is done. So the idea today is to talk about the Palo Alto portfolio and how Comport can help understand the pros and cons of all the different choices that you have within the security landscape. So I'm Justin Youngblood, Field CTO at Comport. I've been at Comport for nearly 2 years. I've been in the industry for 20. My focus at Comport is to build and expand our network and security practice. My focus with my customers is to help build their security posture that aligns with their business goals and the risk tolerances that they have. Some companies have different risk tolerances, different industries, and helping build that portfolio and understand what gaps they have within their organization and help fulfill those gaps and deploy those. And then I have Mike here from Palo Alto. Mike, if you want to do an intro about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Yeah, my name's Mike Haire. I'm with Palo Alto Networks. I am currently a senior systems engineer focusing primarily on the Cortex product set. I've been, 25 years in the security industry. I've been at Palo Alto Networks for the last 10, working across many different segments of the organization. So working with Fortune 500 companies to SMB to healthcare, financial services, and really helping them in all different areas of security, whether that's network security, whether that's data center security, whether it's endpoint security, modernizing their security operations components. Those are the components that I've worked most with, and would look forward to sharing with you some of the things that Palo Alto Networks is doing around those pieces.
Great. So I'll throw you a softball. I'll give you a few questions here to get the ball started here. And I think the easiest one I have for you, not that any of them are hard for you, but so if we look at Palo Alto, everyone thinks of Palo Alto's firewall company. That's where you started. That's where you're born. And what investments has Palo Alto made outside of the firewall spectrum within the security portfolio that's really advanced you guys and made Palo Alto continue to stay in the upper right hand corner of security companies?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. That's a good point. We certainly are known for creating the next generation firewall. That was kind of how Palo Alto was came to be, was really focusing on looking at things beyond just port and protocol based firewalls like they had traditionally been done, and really focusing on application identification, user identification, device control, all of those cool things that we put into the firewall, and did that some 17, 18 years ago. But over the last 5 or 6 years, we have definitely expanded beyond just a firewall conversation, and we have made huge investments in cloud security. We have one of the most comprehensive cloud native platforms that runs across multiple cloud providers, and certainly provides a high level of security from build to runtime. So all of the security steps along the stack to make sure that your cloud environments are as secure as they can be. And then I have on the slide kind of endpoint security, but it's more than that. Certainly we have spent a lot of effort and energy in building out our endpoint security, as well as our automation capabilities, attack surface management. All of those things fall under the Cortex arena of things. And then we've also added a lot of Unit 42 services, so incident response capabilities, the ability to come in and provide services around tabletop exercises, pen testing, those kind of services for our customers. So we're a lot more than what we were just a few years ago. And to put this kind of into perspective, just our last earnings call, which was in August of this year, if you break down kind of those businesses, I mean, overall, Palo did close to $10 billion. It was 9.6 or something like that. But if you break that down, our SASE business, so security access, security edge, was over $1 billion in revenue. Cortex business was over $1 billion, and our Prisma Cloud was over 500 million. So what we classify as next generation security was almost $3 billion business for Palo Alto Networks. So certainly a sizable portion of what we do, and certainly a big focus of what we do. And I think that's one of the things that, there still are today customers that still think of us as a firewall company, but there's certainly a lot more services and certainly a huge part of our business and other components.
Yeah, so it sounds like this Cortex product, which we'll learn more about today, and how that integrates into your SOC, that you have a lot of customers spending a fair amount of dollars to acquire your products to make their SOC more efficient, right? That's when we look at those earnings numbers, that's really what that's telling us at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what challenges, with Cortex, what is the real challenge that you're trying to solve within Cortex? If you were to take a step back when you guys said, hey, we're going to make this marketing thing called Cortex, what's it going to do for our customers? Kind of walk us through the capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've already got the slide up here, but when we looked at this market 4 or 5 years ago, we kept coming into customers and asking them, what are the challenges that they're facing? What are the things that, cause them the most resource consumption on their staff and on their teams? And when we looked at it, we said, you know what, there really are too many silos as an industry, as a security industry as a whole. We're great at coming out with these new tools to get more visibility into an environment. And so we end up with all of these different silos of a lot of different security stack tools that we put in place that generate lots and lots of alerts. In fact, adding more tools adds more alerts to your environment and puts more work and more stress on your SOC staff to be able to analyze those. And what we found is that many organizations aren't able to keep up with the alert. They have alert fatigue. They only have a few minutes to be able to look at something. In many cases, they're not even able to make a decision before they have to move on to the next thing. And so what we really saw was, we've got all of these disparate tools, whether it's a SIEM, whether it's a network traffic analysis, identity and access management, cloud detection and response, and all of these tools feeding into some system. So we kind of call it, in the SOC, that the SOC analyst has to have their head on a swivel. They've got these massive, desk sets with hundreds of different screens that they're able to log into the different tools, collect the alerts, and then in their mind or on a sheet of paper, they're having to kind of connect the dots of how alerts from different security stacks may be related to each other. And that's really was the primary driver behind the Cortex product set, was how do we go about solving this problem for our customers? How do we make it easier for the SOC team to be able to effectively manage their environment? And two key metrics that we wanted to make sure we could improve on is the mean time to detect and the mean time to respond. Because in a lot of organizations, they don't even have the capabilities to measure those, but certainly they don't have the tool set to be able to help them impact those numbers to bring them down into acceptable levels. And so that's what Cortex was designed. And this was really something that we came to market with about 4 years ago. And it really consisted of 3 different pieces. So we had the Cortex XDR, and we were one of the first vendors to come out with a true XDR solution. So expanding upon the EDR environment. So now not just taking in endpoint data, but certainly being able to do all the EDR functionality, but then add to that additional data sources. So bring in that network traffic into your XDR environment. Bring in your identity sources. So whether those be single sign-on providers, on-prem Active Directory, user ID coming in from the firewalls. Bring all that identity-rich data into the environment, stitch it together with endpoint data. Also expanding that to be able to bring in cloud infrastructure. So many organizations are in the cloud these days, and many of them, most of them, in fact, are in multi-cloud environments. So how do you make sure that you're stitching together all of the alert data and information from those? So was our XDR platform, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But then once we saw that we were able to bring in this data to a single repository, start correlating all the alerts and events, then it comes down to how do we respond to those? And our XOR platform is our security orchestration, automation, and response platform. So it allows us to be able to take all of those security events that occur, regardless of the source of where that data comes from, and start to automate the process of how those events get triaged. So a lot of the repetitive tasks that our SOC analysts are doing, we could take an automation platform, script those out so that we could either hand pre-qualified information to the analyst so they could quickly make a decision, or if we had enough information, go ahead and automate the response. Go ahead and isolate that host. Go ahead and disable that user's account. Email that user or that user's manager to find out additional information about what they might be doing on those systems. And then we also added Expanse about 2 years ago, and that is taking a different lens or a different view of the organization's attack surface. So taking a attacker's viewpoint or an outside in view of all the assets that are connected to the internet, so public facing servers, maybe properly or improperly exposed assets, critical infrastructure, switches, routers, firewalls, those types of things, and showing the organization where they might have risk and how they might be able to mitigate that risk through just following good cyber hygiene. So those were the products we set out to market with, to kind of develop those key capabilities to provide a better operational effectiveness for our customers and their SOC.
Awesome. So that's a lot of different products that really fit under Cortex, right? You got, you mentioned all before, the EDR, which turns into XDR, all the automation, all the network forensics to figure out, is this real? Is this normal? All those kind of things. So as Cortex has come together, you've obviously had, like we talked earlier, a number of customers investing in this platform. How can you actually prove that it's actually valuable to the customers? They're getting the dollars back on the investments. Do you have some stats on how that correlates to success?
We do, and I'll show you a couple. This one is actually just showing our SOC. So obviously at Palo Alto Networks, we consume our own products. We use our own security stack. And it was kind of interesting because we have gone through and are still on the journey of transforming our SOC. Our SOC looked like most of our customers. We had multiple tools in place that were generating that whole siloed slide that we showed earlier. But as we've migrated over, and we started this journey around 2017, it took us a couple of years to get everything done. But as we made that transition, these are some of the results that we're seeing in our own SOC. And so Palo Alto, 13, 14,000 employees. We run 14 data centers that not only house our intellectual property, but also a lot of our customer data. So we put all the security controls in place to be able to monitor that. And on a given day, we see about 36 billion events. And events aren't necessarily security things, but that's all the telemetry data that we're collecting. So everything that happens on a particular system, out of those 36,000 billion pieces of telemetry that we're collecting, we identify about 133 potential incidents, meaning things that need to be investigated. And out of those, we have automated or have the automation workflow to process 125 of those 133, leaving about 8 of those for our SOC analyst team to actually look at. We run our SOC with 10 SOC analysts. They generally work business hours in the location that they're in. And then we use automation to call people in outside of those business hours if necessary. And with this tooling, we've been able to bring our mean time to detect down to about 10 seconds and our mean time to respond to under a minute. Now, to put that into some real world perspective of how that might work, we actually have lots of examples of that, but I have one that happened here just recently. One of our SEs was doing some work with a customer. He was actually doing some troubleshooting on an issue that he was dealing with a firewall. He was doing some TCP dumps on his machine, not something he typically does, not something most of our SEs do. And it triggered an alert, essentially an analytic alert that said, hey, here's an unusual process, here's unusual behavior on this user's machine. Taking that alert and then putting automation on top of it, in real time while he's on the phone with the customer, it actually sent him a Slack message and an email saying, hey, we're seeing this unusual activity. Can you tell us what you're doing? He responded back. That escalated it to an analyst. That analyst reached out through Slack, and they collected a little bit of additional information and were able to close that out. The reason that's important is that in a typical SOC environment, that would have been a low-level alert that probably would have not been looked at all. If it had, it would have been weeks after the fact. But the fact that we were able to detect it, respond to it, close it out in a matter of minutes shows the power of how these tools work. Another example of that, this is actually from one of our customers, not our SOC, but they have not as many events, but still a substantial number of those, and then being able to correlate those down into a smaller subset of actual incidents that they need to address. And then they're getting to the point where they're automating the majority of those, not having nearly as many go to their SOC analysts to do things. They will get to where we are over time. But the thing that this customer called out that was most impressive to them was the fact that prior to putting these components in place was that they weren't able to get to all of their alerts. They were getting to about 60% or so of the alerts that were coming in, leaving about 40% that never got processed or even looked at. Putting this in place, they were getting to 100% of their alerts and having at least the automated portion of that to triage those events before they were handed off to an analyst.
Yeah, those are some pretty powerful numbers. So, I mean, you can take nearly this customer, nearly 1 billion events and automate. So when we talk about automating 676, those are non-human intervention incidents that were open and closed or self-healed. Walk me through what that automation would be.
Yeah, automation can be a couple of things. So one of those, it could be fully automated, meaning that from the time of detection, all the processes and steps that need to be done to investigate and identify what's going on with those events, all the way through taking the remediation action. So it can be fully automated or it can be partially automated. And we use both. Automation is one of those things that you start to kind of crawl, walk, run. So you kind of start with partially doing some of the repetitive steps that an analyst would do, automate those. And when you get to a point where you're just, pausing for an analyst to review that everything is correct and moving forward with the next steps, you can just remove those pauses and take the analyst out of it. So yeah, those 676 automations are, a combination of fully automated processes to some that are just enhancing and enriching, before it's handed to an analyst.
Got it. Perfect. I mean, obviously that takes care of a lot of the alert fatigue that's out there. That's one of the biggest challenges the SOC has, is keeping up with the amount of volume they have. And rather than continuing to staff up and make your SOC larger, let's reduce the amount of events the SOC even has to process altogether, right? So if I only have to manage 13 versus all 676 plus 13, that's a lot of reduction of work that we can put to use.
Yeah, and we've seen that in our own SOC, and actually it's what we found. Certainly it means you can do more with less. That's true. We estimate that our leveraging of automation in our SOC probably saves us about 17 full-time employees. So it does about the work of us having to hire an additional 17 analysts. But I think more importantly, the bigger value that we see in our SOC is that we've had almost no turnover since we've implemented this system. And part of that reason is because they're not doing the mundane, repetitive task over and over. And it's also freed them up. They use this 30-30-30 model, which essentially means that 30% of their time they're, actively working active cases and incidents that are coming into the system. The other 2/3 of that time, they're either working on proactively threat hunting, which is really the skill that, most people go into the SOC to develop. So they're getting to do that higher analytical type of work that keeps them excited about working in a SOC. And then they spend that other third of their time working on additional automation, meaning things that land on their desk that they still have to manually operationalize. Now they can focus on creating the automation so that that doesn't land on their desk or any other analyst going forward. And so they love working here. They're happy to get on a call and talk about their experience of, because all of them have come from other organizations where they've worked in different SOCs, and they can talk about the grind and the difficulties of, just the burnout and the fatigue that comes from being a SOC analyst, and how refreshing it is to be here at Palo Alto Networks and to have these types of tools in place to let them, really focus on the things that they find exciting and important in their job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, having the right tools, being efficient, and you hit a lot of key points there on not having to do mundane work, right? Being able to focus on the hard stuff, the fun stuff, building that automation to reduce your own workload, having a tool that can actually help you be more efficient, and actually do the things that your company's quote unquote paid you to do, which is avoid these things from happening versus just processing tickets all day long.
That's right.
Cool. So why don't we take a deep dive into the Cortex product and start talking about what XDR is really doing under the hood, and maybe talk a little bit more about the differences between XDR, XSOAR, and Expanse. Those kind of I'll call marketing terms of those platforms that you have. Let's differentiate those a little bit.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, XDR is really kind of the key component of where we collect data, right? So think of it as a central repository for getting all of the various rich data, the good data that we need to come to some good security outcomes. The first part of that is really is built around our endpoint agent. We have an agent that can be deployed on pretty much any operating system that you have: Linux, Mac OS, Windows, Android, iOS, and really collecting that telemetry data. But it also has all the next gen AV protection capabilities. So we protect for exploits. We use techniques to do that. So, blocking vulnerabilities, whether they're known or unknown, malware protection, tie into, our wildfire sandboxing technology. All of those functionality are built into the agent, as well as just collecting, everything that happens on that system, every file read write, every registry change, every event that goes on, sending all of that information into our central data lake, which XDR then can go in and use to run behavioral analytics. So we use, artificial intelligence and user behavioral analytics to identify those more stealthy types of attacks. So things where, maybe credentials have been stolen, or there's an insider threat, or, someone that's a malicious actor that's on the inside of your environment. A lot of times the only way you'll detect that is through user behavioral analytics. We can also do vulnerability assessment. So we build a database of all the applications, all the software that's running on your system. We tie into the national CVE database multiple times per day. So without having to go run a scan across your environment, we can instantly tell you how much risk for a particular new CVE that comes out exists within your organization. And then as we have incidents, alerts that fire, we can stitch those alerts together. So whether that is coming from the endpoint, whether that's coming from network telemetry that we're bringing in, whether it's coming in from identity sources, we can stitch those different alerts together into a single incident, giving your analysts a clear view of what an attacker might be doing on a system. Did they compromise credentials, and then try to make a connection out to a known command and control site, and then launch or load additional malware onto those systems. Being able to see all of that full causality view from start to finish gives the analyst a lot of ability to quickly identify when there is a malicious event that happens in the environment. If we weren't able to prevent it, then we're going to be able to quickly identify it and start to respond to that. And that could be, going to do a live terminal, meaning connecting into that host and interacting with the task manager, interacting with the file system, running commands from the command line. It could also be, identifying files that are on that system, going through and deleting it, not only on that machine, but across the entire environment. And it could also be, loading forensic capabilities onto those systems to be able to do a deeper forensic analysis of those systems. It could also mean isolating that host, or creating a playbook through automation to go in and lock that user's account, push, indicators of compromise, IP addresses, domains, URLs out to our firewalls, protecting our entire organization. But it all starts from that data collection from the XDR platform and collecting all of the rich data that's from all the different security stack that we have to make sure that we have accurate visibility into what's going on. And then once we have that, we can use our SOAR platform. So XSOAR allows us to, we certainly focus from a Palo Alto perspective, that XSOAR is focused on SOC automation and responding to different security events and taking, the actions that an analyst would typically do manually and automating those. But it can really be utilized for anything. So certainly, when you have an event, we can go create a playbook or a run book that would mirror your organization's typical response to those events. but it can also be utilized for things that maybe aren't directly security related. So onboarding a user, everything from setting up their email account, assigning them, their credentials in Active Directory, ordering them a laptop. Same thing when offboarding a user. Maybe it's, how do we recover assets, forwarding their emails to their managers. Those are all things that we can do with the XSOAR platform. And it really is meant to be a comprehensive security orchestration, automation, and response system. So anything that you have a process for, we can go ahead and through API integrations, we can go ahead and hook those in to be able to run the commands that an analyst would typically manually type in. And then Expanse, it's really our attack surface management. So that ability to be able to go out and discover all of the assets and then that an organization has. And really the key component of this is we go out and we map the entire public facing internet multiple times per day. But the key to our ability of making this useful for our customers is the different levels of attribution that we have for those assets that we've discovered, meaning we can identify all of your IP information. We go out and read all the registry data from all the IP and domain registrar information. That's one attribution level. We also, for systems that we identify that fall into those domains and those IP addresses, we'll scan them. We'll try to figure out what ports are open, what applications are running on those devices. We'll also look for certificates. We can get the certificate information that provides us with a lot more information. And the point of this is that we're constantly learning of all the things that are associated with your organization that touch the internet. So whether that's a public facing server that needs to be there, whether that's a VPN device that has to be there publicly connected, or maybe it's something that shouldn't be. Maybe it's a management console for a firewall. Maybe it's critical infrastructure like a firewall or a switch that really shouldn't be publicly exposed. We'll identify those and allow our customers to be able to identify those resources and clean those up before an attacker finds them. We're really good in the security industry at protecting the things we know about, but things that we maybe don't know about, that's where a lot of the security risk comes in. So our Expanse platform helps us to identify those types of systems.
That's a lot of information. So when we look at XDR, well, a small letter change from EDR, and there's a whole lot more there than just EDR, right? It's a lot more comprehensive. There's a lot more going on. That one little letter in the acronym is a big differentiator than what a lot of people, you ask them what they have for the EDR and how they manage it and all the components on it, and it's a lot of times a little bit of a Frankenstein project, right? They've combined a bunch of different tools together. Some work, some don't work, some work sometimes, and that kind of all boils down to that conversation we we're having earlier about our security analysts' happiness in the organization and why we see so many people moving from one position to another, and then having to build that Frankenstein and then being like, this is too hard. The XSOAR, I have a question on that one. So like the automation. So pretty much anything that has API calls, you can hook into. So while XSOAR is really a security focus, it was invented to kind of automate the security side of it. Obviously, like the example you gave of a new employee or employee leaving, it can still tie into Active Directory to shut things down. Any other applications that support an API call can say, hey, this user needs to be started. This is their information, or they need to be extracted. Do you see a lot of customers going outside of security for that tool, even though it might not be its primary intention?
We do, yeah. I mean, we do see a lot of customers use it for, as they get into it, they usually start with security. That's usually the folks we're talking to. But over time, as they start realizing, oh, we could automate really anything, that's what they start using it for. So to give you an example, I mean, we use it internally at Palo Alto. So like when a customer wants to do a POC or an eval, we go into Salesforce, we put in that request. We actually use XSOAR in the back end to automate all of the components after that. So as soon as I hit submit, it goes ahead and forwards it to the appropriate managers that need to approve it. It goes ahead and goes to our eval team. If we need to ship equipment, it'll go ahead and put in that request. If it's software, it'll go ahead and send that welcome email to the customer saying, hey, welcome to this eval. Here's where you go set up your service. Here's where you download your license keys. all of that's handled through automation using XOR. So yes, we have lots of customers that use it for all kinds of things, even beyond security.
You guys definitely drink your own wine, using your XOR for things well beyond the original intentions, right?
Absolutely.
So, well, moving on to the next thing, when we talk about how a traditional SOC was done, a lot of times they consume the tools they have at the present moment. So we take a look at a SIM, right? A SIM was really not built to manage a SOC. It was helped to manage a NOC, right? It's going to get metrics in for health and maybe fan speed and this user logged in and logged out. So that's security. What's different about your flavor of a SIM for a SOC versus that traditional, and how does that, we talk about automation and alert fatigue and all those things, how does it help benefit the customers if they actually put a product in for the SOC meant to support that SOC itself versus, again, using a legacy tool, for example?
Yeah, great point, Justin. And we've been looking at this issue, over time as well. And when we take a step back and kind of look at the industry, the IT industry as a whole, so many things have changed, over the last, 8 to 10 years. Certainly the network has changed. The perimeter is no longer hardly definable anymore because everything has moved outside of a traditional, perimeter into our data center with, and leveraging technology like Zero Trust and SASE to be able to manage these environments. Certainly the data center has transitioned and been transformed from, being a physical place to now these logical places hosted in, cloud service provider environments. Certainly, traditional ways of protecting workstations and servers has transitioned from, traditional signature-based AV over to EDR, XDR platforms. But to your point, what's kind of stayed the same is, we're still traditionally building our SOCs around a SIM. And the hope of and promise of what a SIM was going to bring to our organizations has really, varied greatly from organization to organization. Meaning that some organizations, if they have the staff, the skill, the expertise to really create those correlation rules and make value out of all this data that's coming into the SIM, they probably had decent outcomes. But I would say for the mass majority of our customers, they just don't have that skill set, the expertise on staff to actually make use of the data. So what ends up happening in most cases is a SIM becomes this kind of big data repository. And when some event happens, whether it's the FBI showing up and saying, hey, you've got some things going on, or whether it's just a security event that leads them down this path, they can go back in time and look pretty quickly and go, oh yeah, last Thursday, Larry in accounting was doing these things. Here's the data that was missing. But it's always in a reactive mode. And so as we've been having this conversation, talking about XDR, talking about XOR, talking about Expanse and how these tools can help our customers to get better at protecting their environment, get better security outcomes, the question keeps coming up going, well, is this a SIM? Can I use this as a SIM? And so with that mindset, that's really what we've developed XIM to be. It's really a next generation SIM platform based off of the underpinnings of the technology that were developed around XDR, XOR, and Expanse all in a single platform, giving you that true single pane of glass. But the combination of capabilities, being able to bring in almost any data source, so hooking in your firewalls, whether they be Palo Alto Networks or some other vendor's firewall, doesn't really matter. We want that network data. There's a lot of good security information contained in those. Bringing in your endpoints, so leveraging the ability to pull in all of that rich telemetry data from your workstations and your servers. Identity sources, huge value in data coming in from all of your different identity sources. And we want all of them. So, it doesn't matter if you're using some different combination of identity sources, pull them all in. Certainly bring in all of that cloud data, all of your ASM information, and really anything that can generate a syslog or some file-based tool that we can pull data from. We want to bring it into our data lake. But the difference here is that instead of just handing that to an analyst and having them need to do something with it, is we're going to go ahead and use automation, AI and machine learning built into our system to parse that data, put it into a common data model, and then proactively be able to stitch those alerts together within the system. And we can go ahead for many of those tasks in the tool, go ahead and create the automations to enhance those indicators that we pull out. Go ahead and take any of those response actions that need to be done built into the system, and then hand it off to an analyst if we need to for them to do further investigation. But it's really built on the ability to be able to do all of those things that we were talking about over the last 4 years in 3 different products into one platform that we call XIM. So it does all of the EDR, XDR capabilities. It does behavioral analytics from both network and cloud environment. It's going to give you the ability to be able to enhance any of that data that we pull out by tying into various threat intelligence feeds and sources. It's going to have the orchestration and automation capabilities built into the platform. It's also going to be able to have the attack surface management all in a single pane of glass, unifying all of your security stack in one place, putting your SOC analyst into one screen where they can do everything from build to runtime of monitoring their entire organization. And so this is really the platform, our ability to be able to use our security stack as well as any third party that you have in your organization. Pull it in, ingest that data. Ingestion is pretty easy, but being able to make it sure that it's correctly parsed and normalized so that we can feed it to our machine learning capabilities, that's really where this product separates itself from what we've traditionally been doing versus where we're going with this next generation SIM platform, and then doing all of the rich enhancement of that data as it comes in to lead to good security outcomes and taking that lift off of your staff. So how does it do it? It's really about being able to take all of that rich data. So the things that are happening from the endpoint, certainly we have an agent that we can deploy that can collect a lot of that telemetry data. But if there's other information that you have running on those endpoints, we can collect that as well. Feed it into our engine, look for threats, look for malware, prevent as much of that as we can. If there are additional telemetry information as we baseline what's normal for that user, what's normal for that device, compare it with peers that are similar to that, and we see deviations in behavior, that's where we can really detect more stealthy types of attacks, insider threats, malicious actors on the inside of your environment that we need to be able to protect against. We can detect those with this, and then taking the automated response action on those, whether that's emailing the user, whether that's emailing a service owner, whether that is isolating a host, locking an account, pushing indicators, IPs, domains, URLs out to the firewalls, blocking those in real time. All of those automation actions can be utilized within the tool. And really, it does come down to, there are multiple ways to get there. We have customers that they see kind of where we're going with this next generation SIM with XIM, and they want to go directly there. We have other customers that they're at different points in their journey. So maybe they're not ready to, not quite ready to be able to take on that much of a project and lift and shift. They can start with the other products. I mean, you can start this journey with just the XDR component. You can start it with security orchestration and automation. You can start it with attack surface management. But at some point, once you get those pieces operational and functional, we can migrate and move you into XIM. It's just a back-end system change. You don't have to redeploy agents. You don't have to redeploy a lot of tooling. We can convert that over, and now you're able to use all of those products in a single platform. In any of these, we can also add additional services components. We have our Unit 42 team. We can offer it in multiple ways. One, we can do managed threat hunting, meaning we can have our team utilize your data and proactively threat hunt in your account. We can also do full MDR, where they can manage all the alerts and incidents as they come in, give you verdicts on true or false positive, go ahead and take that response action for the systems that you give them access to. They can go ahead and do that as well. So we have a lot of different services that we can wrap around the tooling as well. I think with that, you have any more questions, Justin, before we kind of talk about next steps?
Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of hit some of those highlights. So I think some of the key things is if you are heading up your stock team, you don't need to worry, and you're looking and interested in Palo Alto's XIM to help with that. I don't need to be an all-in Palo Alto customer, right? If I have products A, B, and C that I've kind of put together based on decisions made in the past, I can still put in your platform to help automate my stock organization, and then over time evaluate, hey, is it going to be more efficient for me to extend the EDR platform, the XDR platform from Palo Alto into that to smooth out some of the maybe the automation or API hooks that I've created in the past with my legacy platforms. So there's not this all-in approach where you need to buy the whole kitchen. I can just buy the kitchen sink and then add on to it later per se.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's a great point. We realize, as this tool needs to integrate with the security stack that you have. So we can certainly tie into any of that tooling, and we do all the time. I mean, there's lots of things that Palo Alto does, but there are things that we don't do, right? And we also realize that our customers are on a journey, right? They don't have, as much as we'd love them to have all things Palo Alto Networks. For whatever reason, they may or may not be at that point in their journey, but we can certainly hook into any of the other tools, and we do all the time, right? We tie into things like Office 365. We can tie into most of the Microsoft suite. We can tie into, we have over 1,000 integrations that we work with, meaning we already have the APIs mapped out. We have playbooks that are associated with them built into our SOAR capabilities in both XOR and XIM. So that ability to be able to integrate with whatever security stack you have is certainly there. And yeah, if it makes sense to migrate those and do some consolidation, save some money by putting those all into the Palo platform, that's certainly a path you can go. But if there's some, need for, additional capabilities that maybe we don't have in our product, we certainly integrate with that and realize that we'll need to do that, in almost every organization.
Yep. Yeah, a journey is definitely right. I mean, we run it all the time when Comport does a security gap analysis, looking at your tools, looking at even the contracts that you have with them. You signed a 3-year contract 18 months ago. You're not going to double buy for those 18 months. You're going to take use that tool for those 18 months, build a plan for what's going to happen on month 37, and plan for those changes to be made, but make it work with what you have, right? And focus on putting tools in and investing time in areas you don't have versus continue just replacing over and over again the same tool with something else. When we talk about like you mentioned next steps, obviously we can sit down and understand what the customer's pain points are and figure out how Palo Alto can help. But how does a POV work or an evaluation work with a customer? Say I have a stock and we're using a SIM today, and it's a struggle. We manage 500 alerts a day, and we only get to 30% of them. Like, what would that evaluation, that POV, look like for a customer in that scenario?
Yeah, no, we love to do evals and POCs. I mean, that's one of the things that Palo Alto has always traditionally done and done well. It's a pretty, we try to make it as a light lift as possible. Whenever we're talking about doing a POV for any of these products, it's really sitting down and figuring out, okay, what are the security stack that you're using? And let's figure out, okay, how do we ingest data into our system? So what's going to be the mechanism to get that data into our system? Is it tying into an API? Is it having a broker or a collector to be able to collect that data and then ingest it into our system? And then once we figure out what data sources are necessary to accomplish the use cases that you define, it's really taking a deeper dive into those use cases. So we try to figure out what are the top 2 or 3 use cases. Is it phishing email? Is it incident response and investigation? Is it threat intelligence and leveraging threat intel in your environment? And it can be anything, but whatever the use case is, we try to define those to 2 or 3 of those things that we want to work on. And then we will primarily, once we get the data coming in, once we're getting the alerts showing up, then it's really about working on the automation and the response to those. So that's kind of a typical workflow. from a full eval POV type of environment is making sure we've defined those criteria up front of what we want to accomplish, and then making sure that we set those things up in the tool so that you can see them. And then along that way, as we're going through that, we're, training and getting you more familiar with the product and the tool set as you kind of move through the POV process. Usually takes 4 to 6 weeks. We usually want to have a kind of a commitment for about an hour a week to be able to work on things. And then obviously if there's things that need to be worked on in between meetings, we track and monitor those, but we try to keep it tight. We realize POVs are, can be consuming for not only us, but also our customers. So we want to make sure we have well-defined tasks of what we want to accomplish, and then, the appropriate time to get those things done.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, this is the end of our presentation today. If you have additional questions, you're interested in how Palo Alto can fit into your existing security portfolio, we can sit down and understand all the products you have, what those integrations will look like we just got done discussing. Maybe it is a POV that we want to do, and actually want to get your fingers right on the tool and understand how it can automate and save your stock time. Feel free to reach out to Mike or I on LinkedIn, or reach out to your Comport or Palo Alto account director and get in touch. And we'd love to sit down and understand more about what your security posture is, and where you want it to be tomorrow, and how we can fit in to get that number of incidents we have. The one key factor that we didn't actually talk about on both of those kind of upside down triangles is 0 major incidents, right? 0 ransomware, 0 my company's in the newspaper. That's our goal, is to avoid those things from happening, and putting tools, process, people in place to keep that 0 at 0. I really appreciate your time today, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you.